This episode is brought to you by Voxel Libraries. It's a ton of things that make us look really cool, but most of us have no idea how to use it. Hello fellow Novians, my name is Rob and welcome to another tutorial episode. Today we're going to be talking about the build tools and how to use them and how they function and all of the hotkeys associated with them. So I'm going to try to go through all these and just give you the basics, and we'll go into more complex voxel manipulation and things like that in another video, because if I start talking about it, I'm going to keep talking about it. I tried it earlier when I was recording and the video turned into like 45 minutes. So we'll just hold that for another video. Let's start off by talking about the deploy element tool. So the deploy element tool, if you watched my shipbuilding video, which I would suggest, is to deploy all of the elements that make up a ship. So we're on board the Demios, which is a ship I just built. And if we wanted to deploy this element here, we would just place it. We would click the clicky click, left click, and it would deploy, right? If we wanted to pick that back up, we can hold the Alt key and click on it, and it picks it back up. The Alt key works the same way with voxels as it does with elements. So you put your element down, you hold Alt, you click it. Fine movement tool, you use the arrow keys, so we can go into fine movement. This works the same way with voxels. If I move around now and I move my mouse, you can see that it is now on fine movement with the arrow keys. If I hold the control key, you can move it 5 voxels at a time. And if you just use the regular arrow keys without holding control, it just moves in that direction. If I hold R, we can rotate it around the axis. So I'm pointing here, so it's rotating around this axis. If I was pointing at a wall, it would click to the wall and start rotating on that axis, right? If I hold the T key, I can move it up and down, and T also holds a axis when you're moving. So if I put this back, right? Say I want to stay on this plane. Well, normally if I do that and if I just move my mouse around, it drops down there, right? So if I hold the T key and I move this out, it stays on that axis. You see that? So I'm holding the T key, it stays on this axis, on this level, no matter where I move it. If I let go of the T key, it dropped down there. So that is handy to know. Another handy shortcut is the backspace and equals key. If I deploy this and then I hit backspace, it undoes it. If I hit equals, it redoes it. So you can undo and redo as many times as you want, as long as you don't log out of the game. If you log out, it resets your cache and you're back to square one. So if you did a bunch of work and then you're like, I hate this, and oh, but I need to log out for the night. If you come back, you're not going to be able to undo anymore. You'll have to manually delete it. So let's move on to the next tool, which is the deploy voxel tool. By default, your voxel is a 1x1 square. If you hold control, you can make it bigger or smaller by holding control and spinning the mouse wheel. You can see we can make larger and larger boxes. Please note that as you make this larger, it takes up more material, obviously, because it is creating multiple voxels inside the space. It's not just creating the outside edges, it is making a whole block. So that is going to take up more of your material. So, you know, the same thing if I did this and I made a square and then I like made the inside hollow or whatever, it would take up less voxels, but it's more work. But it might take your weight down. So where you can save voxels on a spaceship, you should save voxels. If you're building a regular building, like a ground level building or a space station, you don't care how much weight you put on it. So, you know, just go ham. So moving on, if you hit the E key, it changes the tool. So we have square, circle, or orb, wedge, cylinder, and triangle. Well, half triangle, quarter triangle. Quarter triangle. So you can make a pyramid with that if you wanted to. And that's just hitting the E key, cycles through that. So you might see these, some of these are yellow. Well, yellow means that the game is not so sure it can make that shape. If you hold Control and spin these up to make them bigger, well, you can see that it turns blue. That means I am relatively sure that I can make this shape. The same thing with the cylinder tool. If you scroll it up, it looks better. So if we go ahead and place this, it looks like a trash can. But as we make it bigger, it looks more like a circle, right? So that's how I made this this circle that we're in here now, was using the circle tool and then deleting the center out. And how do you delete the center out? Well, let me fill this in. Right, we'll go ahead and fill this in. If I hold Alt and I scroll this down, boop, it deletes the center out. When I, right? So Alt, same thing that the other thing does. When I hold Alt and I clicked on that seat, it removed it. Well, if I hold Alt and I click on a voxel, it'll delete whatever I'm pointing at. So handy tool. And I'm just backspacing to get rid of that. All right. The fine-tune movement works exactly the same way. We'll go back to a cube. Let's come over here where it's not so glary. Let's go back to cube. I'll scroll this down. You can use the arrow keys to fine-tune move this around. I can use page up, page down to move it up and down. And that way you can place things in the air like that. I can use the shift keys to drag my voxel into other directions. So I'm holding shift and using the arrow keys. Yeah, I can go over here. I can use the page up, page down, make this a little bigger. We can make this taller, right? So we can make a big block here using the shift and the arrow keys. So let's undo that. Alternatively, you can click and drag voxels based on the axis that you're facing. So if I'm looking at this axis, you see how this side of the placement tool is lit up? That means that I'm attached to that axis. Like if I'm up here, the bottom is lit up. Well, if I click and I drag, it'll by default move outwards from that point. You can also go the other direction. But it'll move outwards from that point. It won't move up or down or anywhere else. It'll just move outwards from that point. Now, alternatively, if you click and hold the left mouse button, you can move in different directions from that point. And then when you let go, so let's say I wanted, we'll make it that wide, right? We don't want to go up or down. We'll just make it this wide. And as soon as I let go, it's going to move outwards from that direction again. So same thing with any axis that you're looking at. If I just click, it'll only move out from that axis. If I click and hold, it'll move in the other directions around that axis until I let go, and then it will move upwards or outwards from that axis. Axis. Fun things to know. Same thing with the T key. If I hold the T key, it'll move around. It basically locks it to that plane, and I can move around and place my voxels on that plane, right? All right, same thing. Let's hit T. So now it's locked to that plane, so I can move around there. You see it's not going over there. So whatever axis you're looking at when you hold the T key is where that gets locked. And then it functions the same exact way. If I hold the button, I can move around. I can drag this around. So let's go back. Let's hold the T key and move it over here. And then I'm going to click and hold. I can now move this out. And then if I let go, I can move it up. And we just made a big old block tower, right? So those are the little things you can do with the voxel placement tool. There's a lot more. We'll go into that in another video, as I said. So let's move on to the line voxel tool. The line voxel tool makes a line between 2 points. So it's relatively simple. So let's say I wanted to make a line from here over to there. Well, it's yellow. Yellow means I don't think I can do that. So if I click this, oh my God, I just either made a huge mistake or that's something cool. Because it doesn't want to do that. It's like, no, what are you trying to do? But if I take this and I move it outwards from this point, you can see I have to have something to connect to. So it's red. It says, I don't know what you're doing. What are you trying to do? What is this? Okay, so let's find a point that I can connect to. Let's say I want to go from here over to this wall. Well, okay, let's use the line tool. We can click on here. We can drag it over here. It turned blue. That means it's okay. Click it. Well, now I have this link between those 2 points. So you can see it can be angled. It can be straight. If you're trying to make a straight line, over here, you can see your X, Y, and Z axis, right? Well, you can see I'm on Z25. So if I click there and then I come over here, let's line it up again to Z25, which is right about here. And there we go. Now I made a straight link between those 2 points. So that's how you use the line tool. You can do plenty of interesting things, or you can do some horrible things. Like if I click here and then click over here, it's blue, so it thinks it's possible, but I just did something very horrible there. So let's get rid of that. All right. And we'll move on to the area smooth tool. So let's say that I wanted to smooth out this doorway. I don't like it being so blocky. Well, we'll use the area smooth tool to round out this edge, right? But if I click on it and select all the areas, it doesn't do anything because it's saying there's nothing to smooth here. This is already smooth. I don't know what you're trying to do. So what we need to do with the area smooth tool is create some handles. So if I come out here, I'm just going to place a couple blocks around it, right? And we'll go one high, and we'll have one. If I can get the right area, sometimes you got to play with the arrow keys and the page up, page down to figure out exactly where your movement is. Because when you get working in like 3 dimensions, it starts getting a little wonky. Sometimes you can't keep track of where you are. Anyway, so let me select these areas. So now you can see I have, I'm going to select the ground. All right. So now you can see that I have selected outside of this, and I'm going to click on here to tell it that I want this area smooth. So there we go. It has smoothed. It has done some horrible things as well, but it smoothed it. So you can kind of see what this does. If I click it again, it'll try to smooth it more, and every time I click it, it'll try to smooth it more and more and more. Obviously, this door is square, so it doesn't care about the door because that is a element and not a voxel. And you can also see like what it did to my handles. It like squished them good. So different things you can do. We'll backspace to get rid of that. But generally, yeah, you create some handles. You create a zone that you want to smooth. If I just wanted to do the top here, I could just select these areas. So let's just select these, click in here, and you can see now I have a kind of smooth front face. I don't like to use the smoothing tools that much because for me it kind of looks like Play-Doh sometimes, but there are some designs that I've done that I really do like the smoothing tool. Like if I select out here, we can get kind of more of a smoothed look. If I took the door out of there, it would probably look better. But you get kind of an idea of what the smoothing tool is used for. So let's backspace and get rid of all of this. And I apologize if you can hear the screaming dog. My housemates have gotten a puppy, and it likes to scream. So let's go ahead and I just saw this. So sometimes when you place voxels, they can get a mind of their own. So we're going to use the select voxel tool, which is number 7 by default, and I'm just going to delete these by clicking on them and selecting delete. And then I'm going to use the wedge tool here to wrong material, to replace them. What was I using? Polished gray aluminum. All right, and that is fixed. So yay, I'm glad I caught that, because sometimes I'll miss stuff and have to go back later. But before we do that, let's go back to the smooth voxel tool. So the smooth voxel tool is like the area voxel tool, except it's kind of like a paintbrush, right? So it has this circle, it moves in and out, and you can select different areas. So if I make it small like this, I can click on like this corner and it flattens it, right? So it does some weird things. You can kind of get different edges here, right? So it's good for certain things. Not really good for this certain circumstance, but it is a tool in your arsenal nonetheless. So if I make this bigger and like I click on this corner, whoop, it tried to flatten that corner. So weirdness ensued. It is something that you just kind of have to play around with and figure out. The alt mode of this is the squishing tool, or the pinching tool. So if I hold alt and I click on here, you can see it's pinching these voxels together onto the point where I set it. So you can kind of use that to get some interesting designs, maybe some floor work, or something else that you want to do. The pinching works differently based off of how big it is. So if I make this like super small and then I pinch here, you can see it did that. So same thing if I select here and I pinch it, you can see it's pulling the voxels together at that point. So that's the two functions of the smooth voxel tool. Next we'll go to the linking tool. The linking tool is used to link elements together. I hope I didn't do that. Did I accidentally smooth this whole area? Yes, I did. So keep backspacing until it's fixed. There we go. So oopsie, but good thing I had the backspace, and good thing I caught that, because I would have logged out and come back on and been like, oh no. So the linking tool is used to link elements together. So like this programming board here is linked to this screen. It's also linked to the core, and it's also linked to this relay, which is not linked to anything right now. I took the sensor off because it was doing some weird things. But you can see like the seat is linked to certain things. As you get into like scripting and stuff, you might need to link the seat to a data bank. You might need to link the seat to like a radar. Let me use the one tool to delete that and backspace to put it back. It's no longer linked. So in this demonstration, we want to link this radar to the seat so that when you're in the seat, you can see your radar. So we're going to click on that. We're going to click on the seat. Or maybe it's the wrong way. Click on the seat. Click on that. Yep, there we go. Now it's linked. Sometimes you just got to figure out the direction that the linking is supposed to go. Like engines don't go to fuel tanks go to engines. So you got to click on the fuel tank and then the engine to link it. If you watch my shipbuilding video, you'll see exactly how to do that linking with the fuel tank. One important thing that I want to talk about is cargo containers. So cargo containers, you can link together with a container relay. You'll see these in a lot of ships. So if I click 6 on here and I point at it, this thing is linked to all of the cargo containers. Well, the way the game works, this now is essentially all of my cargo containers. So instead of it just saying this is a relay for the cargo containers, Nope, it is actually the cargo containers. So if you see this point right here, right? The very bright blue lines, that's my center of gravity. Because all of my weight is now in this cargo container, and this thinks it's a cargo container, not just a relay, this is where my weight is. So if I pick this up using the move element tool, which is number 9, if I pick this up and I slap it on this wall, my center of gravity now just shifted over to here. So this is now where all of my weight is. So if I try to lift off, I'm most likely going to have some issues turning. My ship's going to want to drift to the left. It's just going to create problems. So if you link to a container relay, be aware that it needs to be centered on the ship and in a location that's not going to cause you to have pitch issues. So if I took this and I put it on the front or the very back of the ship, it's going to cause various issues. If I put it on the front of the ship's going to want to nose down on takeoff because it now has all the weight in the front. If I put it on the rear of the ship, same thing. My thrusters are going to drag. So you kind of want to put it on the pivot point of where your pivot is on your ship. So where your center of gravity should be. That's just because this now thinks it's a cargo container and all of my weight is now here instead of actually in the cargo containers, which are on the sides of the ship. If I deleted this, it would go back to just being in the cargo containers. So yeah, just be aware when you're linking to a container relay that it does that. So if you're having weight issues, it's usually because your cargo container is not centered on your ship, right? That one doesn't go upstairs. Let's go up. Come on, come on. All right, back on the bridge. And we're going to go back outside here. And we're going to use the number 7 tool, which is your select voxel tool. What does that do? Well, it selects voxels, just like it says. So the way it works is you click in one space, it turns yellow. I am just selecting this voxel. So if I hit Control C, I now have just selected that one voxel. And what can I do with that? Well, I can do a Control V to paste it. So paste, Control V, Control V, Control V. If I hit escape and get out of the tool, well, if I select the tool again and I hit Control V, it still remembers the last thing that it selected, right? So that's what I did with this thing. I just copied this one element and then pasted it, pasted it, pasted it, pasted it. So good stuff. If you want to select more than one voxel at a time, you click on the first one and then you click on your next one. So if I wanted to select just this rectangle here, well, click there, it's just selecting the rectangle. If I Control C, it'll copy that. If I wanted to select like this whole chunk, if I Control C, it'll copy that, right? As I click in different locations, it just drags this selection box out further and further. So what is that good for? Well, let's say that I want my ship mirrored. I like symmetrical designs. So I want this side to look exactly like that side, right? Or I want that side to look like this side. Well, let's say I just want to copy this whole area here. So I'm just going to copy, copy, copy. We're going to grab everything here. All right. If I Control C now, it just cut that whole section out. If I hit R while I'm looking at the ground, it'll mirror. And now we have an exact copy in the exact opposite of this wall. Right? It's an exact opposite. I can take that to the other side and paste it. There is a limit to the selection tool, so you can only copy so much at a time, but I could basically like build one side of a ship, which is how I built this. I just built the left side, and then when I was finished, I selected and then went all the way down and then all the way down and just copied the entire, see, selection area is too large. So there are limits to how much you can copy at a time. So be aware of that. But you can copy a whole like big chunk of ship. So you can just build your right side and then copy it on your left side, and you're now symmetrical. Just make sure you do it right. Other things you can do, things will move on the axis as you hit the R key. So just be aware of that when you're rotating around. So like if I wanted to copy this, down to there, which I did, I would have to look at this area and hit the R key so that it flips it on that axis, not at the floor, because that would mirror it for the other side, but not for up and down. So you have to be aware when using the rotate key which axis you're looking at when you rotate it. Same thing with when you're using the building tool. If you have like a wedge, well, it's rotating on that axis. If I tap R, it flips it. I can rotate there. If I look over here at that wall and I tap R, it's now flipped it that direction, and I can move around there. If I look at the side, like on this axis, and I hit R, it's now flipped it onto that axis, right? So that's how that works when you're rotating. Same thing when you copy big chunks, you can rotate it on whichever axis your mouse is pointing at when you tap R or hold R. Which brings me to the number 8 tool, the Replace Voxel tool. This is just used to pretty much replace voxels. Let's say I don't like how this top section looks. I want it to be black pattern carbon fiber, so I select my material with the mouse wheel here, and then I'm just going to click. It works the same way as the selection tool, and click, and then I'm going to click in the middle once it's selected. So that is now black pattern carbon fiber. The thing to be cognizant about when using this tool is that it will continue to select. So if you do like this square and you click inside, okay, now I want to come over here and do this square. Oh no, it just dragged the box out. I don't want to keep dragging the box out. So you got to hit escape in between your selections. So if I select this, right, and I got to hit escape and then select this and hit escape and then select the next one. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to drag the cursor out. So like this, right? It just keeps expanding the area, and you get some weird things. But thankfully, you can always backspace if you make a mistake. And that brings it to the number 9 tool, which is the Move Element tool. We've already talked about that. That's how you grab things and move them around if it's an element. You cannot copy paste these things, so you have to use the number 9 tool. If you want to do a slight movement, you look at it, use your arrow keys, do not click on it, and you can move that around, right? So there you go. That is all of the build tools in your arsenal. This video has been 30 minutes almost, even though I tried to be super fast with it. So obviously we're gonna have to talk about more advanced uses of these tools in another video entirely. But I hope that helped you out, and if you like what I do, please go ahead and like and subscribe and share and do all those things that you do with YouTube videos that you like. Otherwise, I will see you out in space. Stay safe.